Hey, everybody. Welcome to podcast episode number 19 of the Cash Flow Joe podcast. I said podcast twice, but that's okay. You can tell that we don't have a lot of things pre-recorded. We just do things live. That's what we do here at Pip's Path.
Just do it.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm Pip Stellick, joined by my business partner, Steve Hipple. How are you doing today, Steve?
Hey, Pip. Good to see you.
Always good to see me. That's exactly right. Bradley Strack, how are you doing today, my friend?
Amazing.
Amazing. And we've also got Sam Musa in the house. How you doing, Sam?
Always.
Always. Yeah, that's good to know. So we are here to help beginning investors with their first transaction. That's what Cash Flow Joe is all about. But we also want to make sure seasoned investors know how to make more money, do more deals, be able to do this with less of their own money, so more leverage, and how they can do it in a more safe and affordable way. So our company trains and mentors thousands of students all over the world to become successful real estate investors. So for more information, visit our website. That's pipspath.com, where we have tons of resources for you to get started now, including your personal scorecard. And we want you to fill that out, and then we can do a one-on-one consultation with you, see where you're starting at right now, what you need to do to get going, and so you can start making money now. That's what it's all about. So if you listen to our last episode, that'd be episode 18, we started the process of lease option. And so I think if you want to get the most out of this episode, you should listen to episode 18 first. However, what I'm going to do is I will kind of set the stage and review a little bit of what we talked about. And when we get into lease options, what we want to think about, and Sam talked about this on the last episode. At the very end, we were talking about taking risk. And when you take a little bit of risk, you should get rewarded by getting a little higher return for it. And we can talk about this from just a simple bank account. If you put money in the bank, and you put it in a savings account, you assume that money to be in a safe environment. In fact, there's things called FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. I think that's what it's called. And that insures money you have in the bank up to a certain amount. So you should feel very confident that if you put $100,000 in the bank, you are going to be able to pull that money out in most instances. And if you can't, you're insured that you should be able to get that through different the FDIC insurance companies. And so that is how that works. You don't expect much of a return. We don't even have to get into inflation and all that kind of stuff, but it's safe. So you don't expect much of a return. But if you invest your $100,000 into maybe Bitcoin or something that might be considered a little more of a risky investment, or a new company or whatever it might be, you expect a higher return. But you're taking a lot more risk by doing that. So when we think about lease options, I don't ever want you guys to think that's a risky concept. And Sam was not saying it was risky on the last episode. He's just saying that there's some inherent risk. If we are selling somebody a property on a lease option, they have the right to buy the property for a period of time. And we will even talk about how we determine those price points. If they buy it in year 1, year 2, year 3, we will have that already in the contract. So what are we doing as the seller of the property, the homeowner in this instance, for our tenant buyer? We are taking some risk because the tenant buyer has the option, but not the obligation to buy the property. And so they actually have control of this contract. If they want to exercise the option, they can do so. If they don't want to exercise the option, they don't have to. So they have some inherent safety nets for themselves. Now, do they pay, as we said in the last episode, a little bit higher rent, premium rent? Of course they do. That's the risk that they're taking. The risk that they take is we're going to make sure that they take care of maintenance and repairs. So we are sharing some of the risk and reward of this for the tenant buyer. We, as the homeowner that are selling this property on a lease option, what risk are we taking? Well, we say, hey, and who did we use as our tenant buyer last time? I don't even remember. It was Dick and Jane. That's right. So Dick and Jane want to buy the property from us. And if they want to buy the property from us, and we are basically saying we won't sell to anybody else but Dick and Jane have control of this house for the next 1, 2, 3 years until they either buy the property or walk away from the option.
And actually know the price. They know exactly what they're paying, which, I mean, in a market the market of real estate, prices move, and they don't have to worry about the price moving. They know exactly what they're going to pay year to year, so they're able to purchase that opportunity by paying that a little bit extra rent, by paying that non-refundable. So yeah, absolutely. And if I could, Pip, just about risk and how we measure risk. Obviously, there's inherent risk in every asset class that you take on. So in real estate, what risks are we dealing with? Well, the risk of sunken costs of the price of ownership, but also of the market moving. But the primary risk actually in any asset class is the actual individual that's participating. So the person, the investor themselves, that's who most of the risk lies, and that risk is measured by your ability and your knowledge of being able to execute the deal. A good business can fail if it's managed improperly, right? So the risk is always, the majority of the risk is always inherent to the individual who's actually participating in it. So as educated investors, and you want to know what you're doing when you're doing this, right? To make sure that you are creating a success plan for both the tenant buyer and yourself, it lies in your understanding of lease options and rent to own, which is a great opportunity, more so in this particular market condition, but it just allows individuals to participate, become homeowners and investors. If I could say this, single family homes typically in a normal market will not make you money. They just won't make you money. There's just not enough money to cover all the expenses of home ownership and renting it out. And if it did make you money, and there's times in the market where it does, if it did make you money, then everyone would be able to buy a house. So rent is not going to cover, in most markets, normalized markets, it's not going to cover all the bills and the expenses of home ownership. And this was mentioned in the last one. You want to go back to the last podcast. The individual is covering, the tenant buyer, the person who's renting, they're covering the maintenance. They're covering the maintenance, repairs. Thank you, and the repairs. And what this allows us to do, and the other big one for an investor is vacancy, right? So we're not dealing with vacancy. So just so you know, a standard we like to use is 10% for property management, 5% for maintenance, and 5% for vacancy. So that's a 20% reduction in expenses for us, the investor, by having the tenant buyer. So again, risk lies in the individual. Do you understand how to do this? If you don't, do not suggest you doing it, because you don't want to fail and you don't want to create a plan that doesn't work for the tenant buyer. You want to do this right.
Well, and this is why we have an entire basic catalog of how we teach people how to do this, classes upon classes upon classes. And why do we do this is because this is not something you're going to go out and do on Monday of next week. It's a matter of understanding that this is a process. And here's the cool part about it. You can make, on most lease options, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year, depending on the price point of the house. We're going to show you how to do it with none of your own money and none of your own credit. I'm not too bright, but if I can make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year, use none of my own money and none of my own credit, and at the exact same time help somebody get into home ownership, that's a huge win. And this right here is why this is not a get-rich-quick strategy, but I don't think there's probably many listeners out there right now, or anybody watching this podcast, that doesn't say, that's a crazy amount of income to make without ever using your own money and without ever using your own credit. Now, there's always going to be naysayers and say you can't do that. Well, Henry Ford said it best. He said, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, either way, you're right. And I'm not a guy that likes to argue. These guys know that. I'm gonna let you win the argument. I'm done. I mean, I have opinions just like everybody else, but I don't think I can change somebody's mind. And so what we're doing is we're actually using that as a benefit to us, because when a couple wants to buy a house, what is their mindset? They want to own a house. They want to own a house. Everybody has been preconditioned, has been, I don't know if brainwashed is too hard of a term, but I think it is, by your parents, that you want home ownership. There's advertisements out there that they call it the American dream. I don't know if they have a Canadian dream of home ownership, but
yeah, it's to get a house in America.
That's what I thought it was. So it's American.
That's pretty true, actually.
It's actually, I think every Canadian I've ever talked to said, I'd love to buy a house in the U.S.
Well, I think it was a stat, Pip, I learned it from you, is that 80% of Canadians live near the border.
It's insane.
Why is that?
Well, mostly I think because of weather. I don't know if it's because they like the Americans, but yeah. And so we know that people are already conditioned. We don't have to sell Dick and Jane on wanting home ownership. They already want it. It is so much easier to provide a service or a product for somebody who already wants it. And they want it in the highest amount of desire.
Well, it's their solution. You're offering the solution.
That's exactly what they want. They wake up and they say, "We want to be a homeowner," and that's everybody. You shouldn't use the words everybody, but that's a 90-some% of the U.S. or Canada, probably in most countries. And I think in many countries, the idea of home ownership is so far out there that it can't even happen.
Yeah, Europe's pretty bad. In Europe, home ownership is not even on the radar. Been to Europe and done some education training there. Trained some people there. Home ownership they'll rent their whole life. It doesn't bother them. They don't even look at home ownership as a possibility. Many of them don't. In the United States, the ratio is about 66% of home ownership. So there's about 35% of the country that do not own homes who, yes, absolutely want home ownership. And this is in the 60s, the mid 60s was where Canada sits too. Most countries that have that desire for home ownership do have a percentage greater than 50% of people who want to own homes. So who actually do own homes. So yeah, there's a huge desire to have home ownership.
Yeah, I mean, I've taught this in Australia and New Zealand, and very similar to the United States, and that that's the dream of home ownership. And so I think that right there tells us we don't have to sell anybody on the idea of wanting to be a homeowner. So there's a huge market of people out there that just have a desire, and for whatever reason, and Steve talked about this on the last episode, maybe it's money, down payment, maybe it is credit issues, maybe it is self-employment. You also said it was new immigrants was the other one. Mm-hmm. And then he also talked about people that are going through divorce, downsizing, all kinds of issues that happen to people every day. So we don't have to look very hard to find people that have problems. But those same people want what? They want home ownership. You may have somebody who really doesn't have any problems. And I like to use like young, newly married people. And this is very much a statistic that we have in the U.S. is the fact that prices went up so much over the last 3 or 4 years with COVID, even though I don't think anybody would have ever thought that would have happened.
I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't either. But, certain markets, especially most of the southern part of the United States, the market is so much higher than it was 3-4 years ago that these wannabe, new families, as we call them, that dream is being shattered because they just don't have the income coming in from their job to make it happen right now. But I think most of us want things yesterday. I don't think most of us wake up and say, man, I hope I'm rich in 10,000 years, because we're not going to live that long. We like having those options. Let me give you an example. If you have $5 in your pocket, how many places can you eat lunch?
Not many.
Not many.
7-Eleven.
You can go to 7-Eleven, you get that hot dog that's been in there for 3 days. I don't know why 7-Eleven has that same hot dog in every place I go. And it looks nasty. I mean, it does not even look like a hot dog. It's just rolling on that thing. And that's just like the hot dog Ferris wheel or something. I don't know what's going on there.
I'm not going to say I haven't eaten one of those.
Hot dog museum.
It's in the hot dog museum.
I'll be right back. I'm craving hot dogs.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
And so if you have $5, there's not many places that you can eat lunch. But if you have $50 in your pocket, the amount of places you can eat lunch goes up a lot. What if you have $500 in your pocket? How many places can you eat lunch? You can eat anywhere you want, no matter what the city is. You can even go to Vancouver, where everything is expensive, and eat lunch. Paris, France, you could eat lunch, no problem with $500. What if you have $5,000 in your pocket? You basically could get a helicopter, hover over the city, and eat your lunch. But at the end of the day, it's what? It's a soup and sandwich, it's a burger and fries, it's a salad, it's noodles. It's whatever you eat for lunch. But what does that extra money give you? It gives you options. We love to call this options, lease options, because people have more options. We all want more options. In fact, turn to the person beside you and say, I like options.
I like options.
We all like options. We all want to have options. I mean, isn't it interesting if you crave a certain food and you get that food, and maybe you haven't eaten it in a long time, and then all of a sudden you eat it 2 or 3 or 4 times in a row, and guess what? You're going, I don't really want that food anymore. And so we need options every day. And this is why we like lease options so much, because there's options for us, but there's also options for our tenant buyers in this concept. So let's set the stage here just a little bit, and then we're going to get into some more numbers. And I'm going to say, guys, let's just use $400,000 as our number for a house. I know in some markets that's going to be too high, but in some markets it's going to be too low. And I've seen lease options done on, $30,000 houses. Well, let me rephrase that. I've seen lease options done on $10,000 mobile homes, so I probably better pull that down a little bit. So I've seen lease options done on $10,000 homes. I've seen lease options done on multi-million-dollar homes. So lease option can be done. And you know where lease option comes from? It comes from the commercial world. That's really the commercial real estate world, properties that are millions of dollars. I believe I've heard, and I know I will not get this right. Maybe Sam can remember this. I can't believe I'm using Sam to help me remember something.
I'm nervous.
Maybe Steve remembers this. But there's a really big, and I believe it's a stadium in the UK that actually, and I'm talking like a sports stadium, Wembley or something, I'm not even sure what it's called, that they actually, it was going to go bankrupt or something was happening, and somebody lease optioned a stadium to be able to save that deal. So the point I'm trying to make, and Sam's looking at me like he has no idea what I'm talking about. Do you remember it, Steve?
Well, I'm with Sam. I'm looking at you like, where's he going with this?
Okay. So yeah, we won't even need to get into the details of that because quite frankly, we don't know the details. I had just heard that, and I'm sure this is not the only thing that's happened, but lease option was a commercial strategy before it became a residential strategy. That I know. And so millions and millions of dollars worth of property can be lease option. That is not an issue. And so when we look at this deal, we'll go back and set up the table. We got Dick and Jane. They want to go out and buy a property. They can't quite qualify. The mortgage broker, the realtor, Tom, says they need a pre-approval letter. They go to the mortgage broker. Was it Christine that we used? Let's keep the people consistent here. They want to buy a house. They're close, but they can't quite qualify. Mortgage broker says you can't quite qualify. Mortgage broker tells me, and I'll say I am going to be the investor on this deal. So I'm going to be the investor. And so mortgage broker tells me they can't quite qualify, but he or she thinks that in the next 1, 2, or 3 years, if they do this, 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 and this, they can get qualified. So what am I going to do? I'm going to come in and buy the house. Now, I can either buy the house with my own money and my own credit, or I can use a joint venture partner. And we're going to talk about both of those in this episode or maybe the next episode. But either way, I come in and buy the house. I put Dick and Jane in there as renters with the option to buy over the next 1, 2, or 3 years. My goal is to get them qualified sooner rather than later. Now, what I would prefer to do is, as the investor, I would prefer to go to Christine, the mortgage broker, and use her to help me buy the property. Or even if I had a joint venture partner, I would prefer to have them go to Christine and get the mortgage. Why would I prefer that? Because what does Christine get? She gets paid. Now, when we buy the house, let's think about this, because some of you don't even know this part of it. When we buy the house, my realtor, Tom, in this instance, does he get paid? Yeah. He gets paid by who?
The seller.
The seller. I don't pay Tom. The seller pays Tom. So Tom gets his commission as the realtor when? Now.
No.
He gets it right now. Christine, the mortgage broker, gets a mortgage from me or one of my joint venture partner investors. So are Christine and Tom happy? Duh. Of course they're happy. Any realtor or mortgage broker that's listening to this right now, and you have a client that wants to buy a property that can't quite qualify, are you getting paid? The answer is no. Now we're going to show you how you can get paid when? Now. And we all want to get paid. Turn the person beside you and say, I want to get paid.
I want to get paid.
We all want to get paid. And that's really what it comes down to. So what we have to do, and this is what we're doing, we set the table. We've got Dick and Jane who are going to be renting from us for the next 1, 2, or 3 years until they get qualified. So Steve, what are some things that we need from Dick and Jane that a typical renter probably doesn't do?
A big thing that we need, and this is where the difference from renting versus a lease option, we need security. We've got Dick and Jane that want to be homeowners. They have been saving some money to become homeowners. If they went to Bank of America, or as Pip says, Bank of America.
It's America.
Is it one America? 3 Americas?
It's as many Americas as you want, baby.
So, or I'm going to use Chase Bank. It's just it keeps him more under control and say Chase Bank. He gets excited around Bank of America. So
I don't even use Bank of America, but I sure like to say it. I actually use Chase Bank on a regular basis.
So Dick and Jane, they've been trying to save some money, and I totally forgot I was going with that. Got distracted by Bank of America. But let's talk about the security we need as a real estate investor with lease options. Our tenant buyers, they got to give us some security. That's where I was going, because they're trying to save some money, but maybe they haven't saved the full amount, the 3.5%, the 5%, whatever they need. They haven't saved that. Maybe they've got credit issues. Maybe they've got both. I've had many tenant buyers who've had credit issues and money issues, and they're self-employed. So it can be one of the issues, it can be a combination of the issues, and that's very common.
You mean people have problems?
It's true. People have problems.
And I bet you get paid more when they have bigger problems.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of lease options. Let me put it that way. So we want some security, because if they went to Chase Bank and applied for a mortgage, they're going to say, show me your 3.5% down, show me your 5% down. Do I need 5% down? No, I don't. But I need some security. As an investor, you're going to want to have some security to protect yourself. So we want our tenant buyers to have some skin in the game. They got to have some skin in the game. They want to be homeowners. Well, put your money up, put your money where your mouth is. Let's proceed. So what we call this security, we refer to it, the legal term is non-refundable option consideration. I'm going to say that again. It's called non-refundable option consideration. We can call it non-refundable option consideration. We can call it NROC or NROC. Basically, that's the security, the money our tenant buyer gives us to get into this deal. It's our security. How much security? What's the right amount? Well, there's no magic number, but to give like a good rule of thumb, I want minimum 3%. 4% is better. 5% is better. But most our tenant buyers, if they can't come up with 3% non-refundable option consideration or NROC, I would probably say go back, save a bit more money. Can you sell off, I don't know, a doodad, a motorbike, or a sailboat, or a big TV? Like, I don't know, like come up with 3% minimum. I like more. But that 3% down payment, or that 3% NROC, and that's very important. Don't refer to it as down payment. It's actually non-refundable option consideration. With that, on $400,000, yeah.
Well, I want to think about, because we were talking about this in one of the previous episodes. You were mentoring a student, Matt, in Michigan. Mm-hmm. What was the value of the house? Was like 250, 260, something like that?
Right around 250, yeah.
And how much non-refundable option consideration did you get from that tenent buyer?
The tenant buyers had right around $50,000.
50, not 15, 50, 50.
20% of the purchase price of the property.
That's pretty quick math that you did that, because I was going to ask you, what do you think that is? So why would somebody do that? Is they have money, but they have terrible credit. And it's usually one or the other. They either have no money or only a little bit of money and good credit, or they have bad credit and some money to put down. And sometimes they have both of those issues. But that particular one, you had a lot of skin in the game. So the NROC, the non-refundable option consideration, was 20%. That's cool.
Exactly. Very good. And with that, what we call that, or how we refer to that, is the NROC, whether it's even in the $400,000 example. Let's say a tenant buyer had 3% on $400,000. My mental math is right. That's $12,000 of basically it's security for the investor, security for us. So imagine buying a duplex and your tenants move into the one side and they give you $12,000 security. It doesn't happen with a regular rental. Imagine having two duplexes that give you $24,000. It does not happen with a regular rental. But with lease options, this is kind of the minimum to get into a lease option. So many times I get a phone call or an email or a text from somebody, or I don't know, somebody I've met say, "Hey, Steve, you do lease options?" Yeah. I've got a friend or a son or somebody. They've got. I say, "Well, what's their job? How long they've been working there? What's their income? What's their monthly expenses?" I just like a quick overview of their finances, and just even if do they qualify, and just a very early overview of their finances. And the one question I have to ask, I say, well, how much do they have saved for security? Or I use the word down payment, even though it's not a down payment, but in the very first conversation with somebody, how much they have saved for a down payment. And quite often they come back, well, we don't have anything saved, or we've got $1,000 or $3,000. Well, it's just not enough. And so I'll talk to them about saving some money for down payment. Where can they come up with some down payment money? Because the number one reason people don't qualify for rent to own. Now, maybe they've got credit that's repairable. Maybe they've got a good job. They've, good people. They want to be homeowners. They picked a nice place in a nice neighborhood, but they don't have the 3-4% NROC saved up. And that's a deal breaker. I can't do that. See, I don't run my business as a charity. I say, well, you're nice people. I'll put you in this home, even though you got no money saved up. If they've got no money saved up, how do I know they're going to pay the monthly rent month to month? I don't know they can do that. Maybe they're that bad with money. Maybe they're going through a bad time, but without that security, I can't take that risk. Without that $12,000 or $16,000, with the 3 or 4%, without that, all the risk is put on me.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. If they don't have the money, I mean, you can't make butter with a toothpick. It just doesn't work that way. And so
You just said
You can't make
Can't
butter,
make
with,
butter
a
with a toothpick.
is
true.
that?
I don't know what that even
that is
means.
some wisdom.
if they don't have the money, you can't do it. So
Yeah.
That I get.
you can't make butter with a toothpick either.
Why?
We're gonna try.
Can you make butter with a toothpick? Try it.
Are you meaning like
Go
churning
upstairs
with a
and-
toothpick? Is that the idea?
I'm just saying you can't make butter with a toothpick. You
Okay.
can take
Yeah,
it
okay.
wherever you
All
want.
right.
And so what I'm thinking is there's people that are listening going, but I got this, I want to help this guy into this property. You're saying that if they just don't have a minimum amount of certain stuff, you're going to just tell them no, or say, this is what you got to do to get ready to
Save
to
up
get-
some money.
Exactly.
Save up some money. And even that, let's say they get 3% on $400,000 home, that's $12,000. They're going to give me $12,000 security before I even purchase the home. But that's, like, I'm not going to buy this. Well, now maybe it's a home that we buy for them. They pick the home, they pick the school area. That happens very common, right? Or maybe it's a home that I already own, is sitting vacant. They could say, hey, I want this home. I want that $12,000 obviously before they move in. I want that $12,000 before we go firm in that contract. But the $12,000, what can I do with that? Can I use that towards my financing? Yeah, I can use that as part of the down payment on buying the property because I'm going to get that in advance of them moving in. So I could use that money, however much money it is, I could use it towards financing. Could I put that money in my pocket? Yeah, if I've got a joint venture partner coming to this deal, bringing the money, well, I don't need the tenant buyer's money. I've got a joint venture, or maybe you've got your own money. The $12,000 you could put in your own pocket as a finder's fee. Maybe you split it with you and your money partner. That's what I do. I take that $12,000 and I split it, half for me, half for them. And so that's kind of my payday for finding this deal, putting it together. So that NROC money, but the biggest thing with that is you've got a tenant buyer who knows, like, I want to be a homeowner. I want to do this. It's your security. If it's $12,000, that's 12,000 reasons they're going to follow through and buy this property from you because they want to get that money back.
And we will, if they do everything they're supposed to do, we will give them that money back or credit that money towards closing on the property. So Sam, as we look at this, how do we do like the purchase price on the property? How do you put that into your contract?
So the purchase price is set up and based on projected appreciation. So year one, we would have a price based on, let's pick a number, say a market's got a 10% appreciation rate. A neighborhood's got a 10% appreciation rate. We would come in with something like 5 or 7%. So for the math, let's just say 5. It's a $400,000 house. So in year one, if you purchase this property anytime during year one, it's going to cost you $420,000, right? So there's an additional 5% that's to account for the appreciation. But this is a fixed number, right? This number does not go higher. If the market went up 20 or 30% in that single year, you'd still be able to purchase that property for $420,000, that being the tenant buyer. So I couldn't ask the tenant buyer as the seller for more money. This is the benefit that the tenant buyer has, the person who's renting to own the property has with that contract. It's an exact number. They know exactly what they're going to pay for that property. Year 2, year 3, again, we'd increase it by 5% if we're using that number. So it'd be, we're just going to do for easy math, it'd be $440,000, $460,000 in year 3. So the price goes up, but again, it's fixed, it's exact. The contract has exact numbers in there to account and to ensure that we have a realistic and achievable plan for the tenant buyer to purchase the property. And again, as Steve said, that non-refundable option consideration is in the contract too. That's in the option contract included with the purchase price. That's like getting... That non-refundable is like getting 5 to 6 months security deposit. So instead of renting a property and getting first and last months, I have now 5 or 6 months rent in case the tenant buyer leaves, right? If they leave and the contract is broken, we get to keep that money. That gives me 5 to 6 months to do something with the property instead of a conventional rent where I would only get first and last month's rent. So the contract is built to benefit and protect both individuals based on the risk that they take, as Pip talked about earlier in the podcast, about how we manage and how we look at risk and how that's evaluated. So the price, the cost, and the success is all built into that option contract.
Yeah, and we'll talk about on the next podcast, what if the market goes down and all that kind of stuff. But I think, Bradley, what I want you to hit on this session is, why would a tenant buyer do this? What's that mindset that they have? Because Sam's talking about 5% appreciation and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think it really comes down to, and whether we're talking about the NROC that Steve said, the skin in the game, we're talking about having the price already agreed upon, is everything that we're doing in this deal doesn't just protect us, but we're setting up our tenant buyer for success. And the key is we're taking that higher deposit up front, and I know we don't call it a deposit, that non-refundable option consideration, but we're taking that up front. But that also is because we want to ensure that they have that down payment, because the whole goal of this is for them to become homeowners. If they're going to get qualified, then they're going to need that 3.5% to put down as a down payment once they are able to get their own mortgage. And we refund that back to them. So we're really, everything that we're doing, and why would we not take somebody that doesn't have the non-refundable? Well, they're probably not going to be somebody that's going to have a savings by year 1, 2, or 3, because they've already shown they can't do that. So these protections we put in place really are to not just help us, but set the tenant up for success. Why are we charging 10 to 40% more each month? Because when they go into that mortgage broker to get qualified, they've already been paying higher than what their future mortgage payment is going to be. So the underwriting becomes much easier. They've already shown an ability to afford that higher amount. So, having somebody in there that wants that is just fantastic, and it protects us as well as the investor. Yeah,
and so some of you may think we're gouging these tenant buyers. I've done deals instead of 5% appreciation on a yearly amount, it'd be 1%. It depends on what the market cycle is. And I want you to think about this. If you're a tenant buyer and we charge you a 5% appreciation on that $400,000 house, that should give you motivation to want to be a homeowner sooner rather than later, because you just paid $20,000 more from year one to year two, from when you started this to year one. Well, if you get home ownership, whose $20,000 is that in year 2? It's you as the homeowner. So it's a motivating factor to show them that property value in many instances will go up. And like I said, we'll talk about if it goes down here on the next episode. The key is we want to help people get into properties. We're not gouging them, and we're going to give it back to them if they qualify and get into the property. And we'll even talk about what if they can't qualify and don't get into the property. What can we do in that situation? The key is, as I said earlier, you can't make butter with a toothpick. You guys are going to be thinking about that for a while. One. And I think we're going to just title this episode, You Can't Make Butter with a Toothpick.
So, Pip, let's just, on that great note, let's just kind of recap what we talked about in episode 1 of Lease Option, now episode 2 of Lease Option. So the tenant buyer can pick their own home, or they maybe pick a home that the investor owns already. They're going to have 3% minimum non-refundable option consideration as your security. So you get that money down. If it's 3% of $400K, it's $12,000, could be more. We've had much more. We've had 3-4%, every number in between. We're going to have premium tenants. They're going to pay premium rent. So they're going to pay, as Bradley said, 10 to 40% more than fair market rent. Well, why would anybody pay 10 to 40% more than fair market rent? Well, we're giving the opportunity for home ownership. We're buying a home that they pick, or a home that they love, in the neighborhood they pick, the school district they love, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, garage, no garage. They pick the home, they pick the area. So we're giving them a lot of benefit for that 10 to 40% more. Can we help them accumulate money? Yeah. For the down payment? Yeah. Can we help them fix their credit? Yeah. Can we help them talk to a credit specialist or a mortgage broker to get them into home ownership? So at the end of the rent to own term, they're going to have all the money saved, credit repaired, in a home they love. So and they've got security. They've got that NROC money that gets credited back to them at the end of the deal when they buy it. So why wouldn't they buy it? So I just want to do a quick recap of what we've covered, because we've covered a lot in these past 2 episodes, a lot of good stuff. And like I said, I like talking to them as homeowners in training. Another thing I do when I'm talking to joint venture partners is doing nice homes in nice areas. I don't like doing lease options on crappy homes. I like doing nice homes, nice areas, because you have pride of ownership. The homes, do you think a home in a nice area is more expensive than a home in a not so nice area?
Duh.
Yeah, it's nicer. It's more expensive. So if we're talking about making money and appreciation as an investor, I actually want to do more expensive homes versus cheaper, because I buy a home, do the due diligence, do the home inspection, buy the home, close on it, get the financing. Whether if it's a $200,000 home, I'll make a bit of money. If it's a $400,000 home, I'll make more on appreciation, mortgage pay down, cash flow. Now, I'm not saying go super expensive. We want to do the average of that city, of that neighborhood. Let's do the average of that neighborhood of the area. Let's not
And
get too
ultimately,
carried
I
away.
mean, it's driven by the tenant buyer, right? The person who wants to purchase. They pick the neighborhood, like you said. They find the area that they want, and those wanting neighborhoods, those neighborhoods that people want to step up to, are the areas that we want, and they are nice houses. They are good school districts. That's where people want to move.
Sam is so right. This hinges on the quality of the tenant buyer. If somebody comes along and says, Steve, I want to buy a $5 million waterfront property, you're like, okay, interesting. What's the quality of the tenant buyer? If they're a professional, strong earning, year after year, good income earner, maybe they had an issue, maybe they can't get a mortgage for whatever reason, divorce, downsize, illness. Good people get sick. They can't work, so they have a blip in their credit. This thing's happen. So I'm not in a hurry to buy a $5 million property, but if the quality of the tenant buyer, the numbers make sense, we would definitely entertain that and do the deal if the numbers made sense, but it's the quality of the tenant buyer we want.
So this episode, obviously a continuation of the last episode. Guess what the next episode is? It's a continuation of the last 2 episodes. So this is to be continued. Remember those old shows in the 70s and 80s, and they had an episode and was to be continued, and we just couldn't wait till the next week when we heard it. So
I'll be back.
that's right. We're going to make sure that you listen to the next one, but you should make sure that you have seen or listened to the scene. I guess you could see them too, because we're on video. You could see or watch or listen to the last 2 episodes, this one and the one before, because now on our next one, we're going to talk about how do we finance those lease options? How do we get the money to do those deals? Like I said, you can use your own money, you can use OPM, and you can use OPC. We'll talk about that on the next episode. But before we get out of here, just want to say again, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you choose. For more information on us, go to our website, pipspath.com. Follow us on social media. That's Pipspath the Property and Cashflow Joe Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Leave us a comment, give us a follow, and we will see you on the path.